think the question of how the tax system can make us healthier is clearly a challenging one, but I think we have to start by asking ourselves how the system at the moment makes us unhealthy. Too many foods that make us unwell, in particular that make us fat, are too cheap. Many people will have been struggling in recent years with the costs of living, but looked across the last 50 or 60 years, food has become cheaper and cheaper relative to the other costs of living. And in particular, the kinds of foods that are quick and easy for manufacturers to produce have become cheaper and cheaper, and they happen to be the kinds of foods that contribute significantly to obesity and clearly things like diabetes. So it seems to me, and what I argue in the book, is that we could use the VAT system, a system that already puts tax on a number of the things that we buy, in a much smarter way. Smart VAT. We could increase the price, put higher VAT on the foods that make us fat, foods that make us unwell, foods that put too much salt in, and reduce the price of healthier foods, have negative VAT on the healthier foods. And this is something that would be completely legal. We already have a mechanism for doing it. We call it VAT. And interestingly, now that we've voted to leave the European Union, this would be easier to implement than it used to be. In terms of how this would feel or look to ordinary people, you and me, as we go shopping, I think one of the most important things is that it needs to be visible. At the moment, most of the taxes that we pay on the things that we buy are invisible. Government already uses tax on cigarettes, for example, to try and deter us from smoking. So I see no reason in principle why we shouldn't use taxes to deter us from eating unhealthy foods. But as anyone who smokes, or indeed anyone who drinks knows, you do not see the tax you're paying when you buy these things. So I envisage that when you go to Tesco or Asda or wherever you do your weekly supermarket shopping, the price of the item would be very clearly displayed, and so too would the tax. There would be a clear sign which says, this has been identified as an unhealthy food product, and you are paying 20% extra. This, very nearby, perhaps right next door, has been identified as a healthy food product, and has minus 20%. So that rather than seeing £1 plus 20 pence, you pay £1.20, you see £1 minus 20 pence, this is going to cost you 80 pence. And as my mother has been telling me all my life, everyone loves a bargain. So the cost to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, to the government, would be nothing. You know, these amounts would balance out. But you, the shopper, would be clearly shown a signal that this item, the healthy item, is a bargain. And that seems to me to be a very fair way of doing it. This is a way in which I think a lot of taxes and people who worry about taxes think that this kind of idea would punish the poor, and it would be poor people who would suffer most. And I think by reducing the price of healthier alternatives, it would actually make it more affordable for most people to buy their weekly shopping basket, and to do so in a healthy way. The question of who would choose which items were healthy and which were unhealthy, and what the tax rates would be, is another delicate question. I think few people trust government enough these days to just hand it over to some officials who would then choose. I don't think we would believe that. But there have been some very interesting experiments done. I was involved in some in Northern Ireland, and I know others have been done in the States, where groups of ordinary people have been sat in front of tables covered in all the normal food products that they buy. And remarkably easily, actually, people are able to distinguish the healthy foods from the unhealthy foods. And I think that's the mechanism that would work best, and the one that I propose in Bad Habits, Hard Choices. That we would use sort of citizen engagement to decide what counts as healthy food and what counts as unhealthy food. We clearly need to involve nutritionists and experts to confirm. And again, the experiments I've referred to have done this. And although it might sound very difficult in practice, it turns out to be much easier than people might suppose, and for consensus to emerge relatively quickly. Most people know what foods are good and what foods are bad. Once we've done that, then we would need to decide what the tax rates would be on those relative foods. And this is complicated. No one really knows how people react to higher or lower processed food. There's some complicated economics here, which I won't go into now. But in short, no one knows for sure exactly how much people would buy the new, cheaper items and reduce their expenditure on the more expensive items. So there'd have to be some mechanism for refining things as we went along. The mechanism I recommend in the book is based on an organisation called NICE, which is the National Institute for Clinical Health and Excellence, which is used by government to decide which drugs should be available on the NHS. And this is an organisation which deals with huge organisations, government, big pharmaceutical companies, the big retailers, and draws conclusions about how public money should be spent in very sensitive areas. These are literally life and death decisions that NICE make. So I see no reason at all why we shouldn't have a similar mechanism whereby once the public have been substantially involved in deciding what counts as healthy and unhealthy food, that a NICE-like organisation would then decide the relative tax rates on the healthy and the unhealthy foods, and would then monitor over time and would perhaps change those tax rates every year or 2 or 3, so that we as a population over time move in the direction of eating more healthily. This isn't a straightforward idea to implement. If it was easy, it would have been done already. And there are a number of significant barriers that would need to be overcome. One of the biggest is the VAT system itself. This is a system that was brought in the early 1970s, and no government has ever done a significant reform on VAT, because it's a huge job. It's a huge job. And it would take a few years, and it would cost a lot of money. A lot of money. So there'll certainly be resistance from government to undertaking a reform of this kind. I think there are 2 reasons for supposing that resistance could be overcome. One is the cost of reforming VAT is undoubtedly lower than the cost of obesity. The crisis that we're causing for ourselves, the obesity crisis, is dramatically more expensive than the cost of reform to VAT, which could be a significant contributor to tackling obesity. The second is that reform of consumption taxes and other instruments that government has at its disposal is going to happen anyway now that we've left or we're going to leave the European Union. So I think it can fit with the direction of travel. The other resistance, I suspect, will come from big business, the big retailers and the big manufacturers, who will almost certainly propose or suggest that this is unfair on consumers, that it's going to increase the cost to consumers, that it's interfering with our free choice. And I think the pushback there is our free choice is already being interfered with. The choices we're being offered are the food that makes them the most money and makes us fat or otherwise unwell. So this seems to me to be a perfectly legitimate rebalancing of the way things are. It's possible that some newspapers won't like the idea. It's possible that some citizens or consumers won't like the idea. But I think we need to think about things like tax on smoking, tax on cigarettes, trying to clean the air we breathe by, for example, trying to stop diesel emissions from vehicles. There's a variety of things that government has done over time to try and help us make better choices for ourselves, where unless we're helped, it's incredibly difficult. And I think that the kind of tax I'm proposing should perhaps less be thought of as smart VAT and rather more as us helping ourselves to make the choices that we actually rather make so that we can live healthier lives.